Hello, hello, and welcome everyone to In Time. My name is Nicholas Lamar Suter. Thank you so much for joining us. And with me today is 𝐓𝐢𝐬𝐜𝐸. 𝐓𝐢𝐬𝐜𝐸, how you doing?
Oh, pretty good. It's nice and cool where I'm at, so
That's
cool
good.
89 degrees.
We've been having this discussion, so for those of you who don't know, he's a trucker. And um, despite all, and I've been learning so much, and it's actually really interesting stuff and changes my perspective on a lot of things. But um, the other thing is, aside from you've got time to learn stuff, as long as it's on audiobook, because presumably you shouldn't be reading while driving. You had mentioned you've seen people doing that, so you've seen a lot of shit.
I'm, I'm
Yeah.
not. I'm not
Yeah.
supposed to be doing that?
Yeah,
Oh,
I
crap.
know.
I've seen some really weird stuff going on. Yeah, I've seen some weird stuff.
Yeah, someday we're gonna have to do a show on that. One of the things, actually, I'll change direction from where I was going with this. Is one of the ones one of the times we were speaking about 2 weeks ago. You had gone by an accident that had some pretty significant fatalities, and you're just, oh yeah, they're dead, they're dead, they're dead. I was just like, ooh, I'm not used to that level of frankness with it. But of course, the roads are dangerous, and you've seen a lot of that shit. So there was just it was an interesting perspective. I know somebody who seems to be like this pro-gun nutcase who likes to talk about how dangerous our highways are. So obviously guns must be perfectly safe. Just a straw man of them, just a touch. Um, but anyways, I don't know. I just thought that was I was just like, for you, that you were just like, oh yeah, they're dead. And I was just like, well, okay, that threw me.
Yeah, when you've driven over 1 million miles on U.S. highways, you see some stuff, and then you can come every once in a while. I mean, it's not super common that I come across what is clearly a fatality accident, but that one that I was on the phone with you that shut down I-84 in Idaho, you couldn't even tell what was left of the car was a car at one time. The only reason that you would know is because it was sitting on the side of the highway. It was actually in the median, and you could see that it was a car truck. And what I think, if I recall correctly, the story that I read, and I think it was about this accident, was the car had lost control. It was going eastbound, and the truck was going westbound, and the car went through the median and actually hit the truck head on. So it took the entire front end of the truck out. It knocked the motor out of the truck, the front axle, the entire hood. And so it was just the front of the cab where the windshield is. That was where the truck ended. It took everything from there forward out. And like I said, the car it was just a twisted hunk of metal. You couldn't even tell it was a car. So it's like, yeah, it's incredibly unlikely anybody in that car made it out of that car alive.
And last time, and then we'll get to the show before we start boring people, but the last time I had studied these statistics, and it was a while ago, we lost about 40,000 people a year on our roads. And I remember using that number with you, and you're like, no, that ain't it. I was just like, yeah, it is. I remember looking it up. Like, when did you look it up? Like 10 years ago or something like that. What's the number? How many? Because it staggers most people, and it's worth knowing for any number of reasons. Because when we start talking about how dangerous people who say, oh, I err on the side of caution, really piss me off. If you always err, I always err on the side of caution, always err on the side of caution. That can't possibly be true. If that were true, you wouldn't be leaving your house, because driving, the roads are dangerous. So what are the numbers?
I can't remember now off the top of my head. It was something like 120,000. It's like over 100,000 people die a year on our highways. I mean, I'm sure I can find the statistic pretty quickly, because I've got several pages of statistics saved in my phone, but I can't remember exactly what the number is off the top of my head. I don't normally engage in conversations or about highway safety, because we've already made the choice that the risk is worth the reward of being able to use cars. Our entire society is, except for select inner cities on some of the larger cities, our entire country is set around individual ownership of cars. So we've already made that decision.
Yeah, you don't keep those. You don't like keep numbers like at the top of your head. You didn't like just call me and sit there and say, "Guess what numbers just came out, Nick? The gun numbers. Want to hear what these numbers are?" No, not really.
But I just keep them at the top of my head. They had just come out, so I had just literally finished downloading the report. And even then, I still had to actually refer back to get the exact number so that I wasn't being, it's like I can usually give you a ballpark of the numbers because I've, especially in the statistics that I actually pay attention to, because I've seen them enough times. It's like, oh yeah, it's like, okay, well, about 17,000-ish, people, were stabbed to death or killed with knives, sharp pointy objects,
Sharp
in
pointy
2020.
objects.
So it was 17,000 something, So I can give you like a ballpark, but the exact number, I'd have to actually look at the.
Yeah, why do I have a feeling you'll have that by the end of the show?
Number of homicides committed with rifle in 2020 was 455, and it was 206 that were homicides committed with a shotgun. So
now the rifle, is that like the AR-14?
Yeah, that's exactly what it is.
Okay, perfect. All right, $5 super chat. The Sinister Porpoise, who is backstage right now, waiting. Even political power grows from the barrel of a clock twice a day. Oh, okay, she's going to have to explain that one to me. All right. So yeah, and we started out of the gate, and I could speak. That was unusual. Hi, KCA Randy, Daryl Frost, Maya, Jake 4D, Titan, of course. Thank you all for joining us. So, as you all know, Facebook was out for 7 hours yesterday. WhatsApp, Messenger down. There was a lot of speculation if this came as a result of Frances Haugen, who was a whistleblower who the day before had given to the New York Times and to Congress, essentially a deposition or a whole host of files related to her claim that Facebook, and this is going to come as a shock, doesn't care about your privacy, doesn't care about society, doesn't care about fake news, false information, doesn't care about much of anything other than maximizing profits. Now, truth be told, corporations are supposed to care about that above anything and everything else, and unfortunately that's just legal precedent. That's where we are today in this country. I don't believe they should be set that way, but that's what they are. They're required to make money for their shareholders. Nonetheless, this was really a rebuke above and beyond. There are plenty of Google has done plenty of terrible things, but their motto, don't be evil, at least for a while, they seem to stick to reasonably well, and they're still certainly not the worst company out there, but she's painted this company at, oh, dear Lord. We're going to get into some of the things she has said. She testified earlier. Was it yesterday? Today? I don't even remember. So we're going to discuss that. We're going to discuss what we know about that outage. And then we're also going to discuss a bit about her testimony and a few other things. So if you could all welcome for me a Sinister Porpoise, who either I moved her camera, which may be the case, or her camera. There it is. And please remember, you're muted, so why don't you unmute and say hi. All right, now we can. Oh, I think I hear you now.
Good evening, Ron. Good evening, everyone. I am the Sinister Porpoise. When you think of Sinister Porpoises, think of the Sinister Porpoise. And I think one of the greatest quotes to come out of today's particular testimony was, Facebook was down for 5 hours and take it away, Nick.
Okay. Oh, yes. All right. Well, hold on a sec. Let me grab that quote. I had that. So yeah, she was testifying, and among other things, she said, quote, yesterday. So she testified today. She said, quote, yesterday we saw Facebook get taken off the internet. I don't know why it went down, but I know that for more than 5 hours, Facebook wasn't used to deepen divides, destabilize democracies, and make young girls and women feel bad about their bodies. That was her intro. That was her opening statement to Congress today. So let's get the light stuff out of the way. Why did Facebook go down?
Well, there's an easy way to explain it that isn't really what happened, but if you're not really interested in the technical details, essentially Facebook's routing table got deleted from very important routers. Now, the accurate explanation is more complicated. Because Facebook uses, these routers use something called Border Gateway Protocol. Now, if changes are made to your internal routing tables, what you want to do is use Border Gateway Protocol advertising statements to update your routing data. From Facebook's own sources, it appears that one of their engineers doing maintenance on their systems, and it does seem to be internal to Facebook, according to their own statements, decided to run some tests on the router, but for some reason these tests caused the DNS tables to essentially entirely disappear. So basically, if you had Facebook's IP addresses, you could still get to Facebook, but if you were using facebook.com, the name wouldn't resolve. Like, I should have taken a screenshot yesterday. When I tried to look it up myself, I did an NS lookup, which is a command that lets you look up the name servers, essentially, to get the IP addresses. And I couldn't get an IPv4 address, but I could get an IPv6, which was really weird.
Well, the IP4 and the IP6 routing tables are usually separate for the reason that they're not even compatible with each other. So it maybe just IP4 went down and IP6 was still up, although I don't even know. Not most people can even go out on IP6 right now. I have to interrupt. We have some breaking news, and this looks really important here. According to Jake4D, according to the Association for Safety International Road Travel, more than 38,000 people die every year. That would be about 40,000. That was the number I used.
Yeah.
That was my number.
Remember when I sent you the link?
No. I'm just trying to. I think we need to get clear here whose number that was. Right? That was.
Yeah, I'm not sure. I don't remember. It was too long ago. I remember sending you the
so long ago, yeah.
Actual link to it.
You did send me the link, and it seemed to check out, which just means that you probably faked it. Because I'm sure I did. I'm absolutely gonna believe Jake4D, because he said it's the Association for Safe International Road Travel. So I'm assuming it's in American, and that the numbers. I mean, I'm hoping.
That could be it. I haven't looked into traffic fatalities very much. I mean, and the statistic could have been traffic fatalities and serious injury requiring hospitalization. It could have been a combination of those. I mean, I don't remember exactly where we looked.
Yeah,
I just remember.
I just like saying you're wrong. That's all. I don't get to say that enough that I feel confident about myself.
Go for it.
Well, thank you. You're a good friend. Thank you. I appreciate your understanding. So everybody knows that he was wrong, and we probably won't get many of those in the future. But at least I got one in now. Thank you. Hopefully, we won't check the numbers.
I can't be right all the time. I mean, if I was right, it would get really boring if I was right all the time too.
Yeah. Well, why don't
as I was saying earlier.
Yes, please, Porpoise.
As I was saying earlier, even political power grows from the barrel of a broken clock twice a day.
That was actually really good. Oh, dear Lord. Yeah, that was. We need to get the Okay, approximately 1.35 million people die in road crashes every. Now, you see, the question is that in the U.S. or is that across the world? So if that's across the world, that would be.
No, I'm sure that's worldwide.
Okay.
1.3 million. That's got to be a worldwide statistic.
Yeah, that would have to be, because there's okay. So all right. So anyways, as we were saying, so and I think this is also interesting. So because of the way the internet works, there's actually there's really for any internal network, there's actually really kind of two networks. There's your internal network that has its own way of resolving domain names locally or just IP addresses locally. And then the external one. So anyone inside the Facebook organization could probably still access Facebook, but anybody outside of it couldn't access it because the names wouldn't resolve. You type in, the name that you type in at the top, facebook.com. There is no facebook.com. It doesn't exist. That has to get translated into numbers that computers can understand. And that translation service essentially is what was failing to get back the proper address. Because it hadn't been updated correctly with the correct numerical address that it translates the name from. Is that roughly accurate?
Yeah, as long as if you still, as far as I understand what happened, and I suspect more data will continue to come out, although if it looks like right now it was an act of temporary incompetence, which I'm sure someone has been very fired over at this point.
Temporary? Can you even have temporary incompetence? I'm not even going to go. Temporary incompetence. Okay. That sounds.
Someone screwed up, basically.
I've had temporary incompetence for the last 45 years. All right. So, all right. So, these rumors that it was an act of sabotage, that somebody was pissed and hacked into Facebook, and rumors that Cloudflare, which is the largest sort of middleware solution that actually hosts, it's a content delivery service. They host content to help you speed it up so that they'll actually host it from somewhere much closer to whoever you're connecting to. There was a rumor that it was Cloudflare's screw up. Excuse me. They've been behind a couple of these at a time, and they host a staggering amount of information. I mean, it's amazing how many websites use Cloudflare. So, but it looks like it was not their fault either. So, internal to Facebook, their largest outage since I forget the year, but they lost almost a day. Is their actual largest outage, and at this point they have, if I remember correctly, 3 billion subscribers, which is pretty impressive for a planet that has 7.7 billion people on it. That's almost half. So, yes, I'm sorry, what?
Oh, sorry. There's something of a delay, and it's hard for me to tell. But there are some interesting things she brought up that don't just apply to Facebook, I think. And I think one of the problems that we have with letting big tech take over the internet in the way that it has is the internet is supposed to be a decentralized network. So if Facebook goes down, there are supposed to be less reliable routes that it goes through. But essentially what happened is even those routes had their DNS information changed incorrectly too.
Well, and that's one of the problems. There's a difference between going down and then propagating the wrong information. If Facebook themselves were responsible for propagating the wrong information, it does seem that many of the backup routes in would go down. But all right. So
if it was,
yes, I'm sorry. What?
If it was just deleted, there should be. Sorry, continue.
Well, yeah. If it was deleted, well, see, that's the thing. It sounded to me like maybe somehow they pushed the wrong data through, but if it was just deleted, presumably there'd be backups and yada yada yada. So there's a very different thing between deleting it, which is much easier to recover from, than actually pushing the wrong data into it. And it sounds like that's what happened. But at a minimum, we can put the conspiracy theories to rest. And Facebook is claiming that it was one of their own employees. I have no reason to doubt that claim, since ostensibly they'd much rather blame somebody else. So let's deal with then sort of the larger issue of this testimony. So Frances Haugen, as I said before, dropped both to Congress and to the New York Times a bunch of documentation and ostensibly a deposition, and gave her testimony yesterday in which she lambasted Facebook. Now, she was hired by Facebook in order to help them come into compliance with new laws regarding, quote, fake news. Boy, I really shouldn't use that, because the person who coined the phrase, holy smoke. But to combat fake information that was being posted as accurate, to combat social media bullying, the toxic nature of Facebook and other social networks. And she said that during her tenure there, which this was primarily her job, she was solely dedicated to attempting to come into compliance with these regulations. She said that after all of her work and effort and fighting against a corporate culture that was fighting her and making profits far more important than this, she said that she believed she succeeded in removing roughly 5% of the offending material from Facebook. That's 5%. Now, YouTube seems to have had somewhat more success with this than Facebook. Any of us who run a YouTube channel have now bumped into a somewhat aggressive algorithm from YouTube to deal with it. I certainly have not seen the same with Facebook. But anyway, she said, quote, "I saw Facebook repeatedly encounter conflicts between its own profits and our safety. Facebook consistently resolved these conflicts in favor of its own profits. The results have been more division, more harm, more lies, more threats, and more combat. In some cases, this dangerous online talk has led to actual violence that harms and even kills people. This is not simply a matter of certain social media users being angry or unstable, or about one side being radicalized against the other. It's about Facebook choosing to grow at all costs, becoming an almost trillion-dollar company by buying its profits with our safety. During my time at Facebook, I came to realize the devastating truth. Almost no one outside of Facebook knows what actually happens inside Facebook. So, yes.
I want to be honest. Sorry, go ahead.
No, please. I was
None of
asking you
this
guys your thoughts.
surprises me.
I'm not sure that it surprises me. I'm disappointed, and it feeds into already what would have been my worst. Look, we've seen Facebook screw up time and time again, and Zuckerberg comes out and says, we'll do better, and then they do some cynical ad where you can tell they're just trying to tug on heartstrings, and they don't seem to be doing anything about it. We already know Facebook actually causes psychological harm, and here's why. Most people get depressed when they go to Facebook. Why? Because they see all their friends who have nice cars, have nice families, have perfect families, perfect cars, yada, yada, yada. Well, these guys they're only posting their best stuff on their own timelines. Nobody's posting, oh yeah, this is me getting out of jail. So you always see this unrealistic Uber, this Christmas fantasy of, and then we did our vacation in the Bahamas and we did this and this, and nobody's life can compare to the life of the average Facebook user as they present it. So there's several studies that have shown that people get depressed when they go on Facebook because they can't compete with this non-reality that it's doing. So there seems to be, outside of just the obvious that we've been talking about, the fake news and the bullying and all this other stuff, there just seems to be a lot of downsides to this platform.
Facebook's model essentially is data collection and selling your data, which is why they aggressively collect data. I recently had to go back and turn off a lot of Facebook tracking stuff off. So if a lot of us use Facebook because it's convenient, it's a way to keep up with family, but keep in mind that Facebook is very much just there to collect your data. And it doesn't care what it does with the data. There are other things it does, and admittedly, a lot of businesses have become dependent on it because it's convenient. Rather than have their own web page, they just have a Facebook page. And this is not something I recommend either, but it's also businesses have to give the customers what they expect. So, and Facebook is like any other company. It's going to care more about its profits than its people, and we really need to start regulating these tech companies much harder than we do. And I would love to see Sandrid's take on this, because I know he disagrees with me on that one.
Well, I mean, it kind of depends. When you get big, huge corporations that have near monopolies on things on the, access to things like the internet, there is definitely a role for, the ICC exists for a reason, So I'm not necessarily opposed to, making sure that very large corporations that have a huge market share on things like that, aren't doing nefarious things with it.
Titan asked in chat. Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
I can't remember who said it, but somebody was like, anything that you use on the internet that's free to you've got to realize that you're the product.
Yeah.
So if I'm the product, okay, so I think of myself as the user, right? I log into YouTube if I'm the product, who's the user? Who are they selling the product to?
Data collection companies.
Data collection companies, advertisers, stuff like that, right? So.
Yep.
Okay. So
people who want to sell you stuff.
So I'm creating content. All my content isn't for me to use. That my family can read it is kind of an ancillary side effect. They want my family to read it so they can sell my family products, and Amazon and all these other things they tie in with Amazon too. So if you were just looking at something on Amazon, the tracking passes that on to Facebook. That's why whenever you go onto Facebook, all of a sudden you see Amazon ads for stuff similar to what you were looking for earlier in that day. So
it's also why Facebook.
Yeah, please.
I'm really bad about that. I apologize. It's also why Facebook was very mad when Apple, on its iPhone or iOS apps, gave users the option. It's like, hey, this app tracks your data. Do you want to block this? And most people were selecting yes. Facebook did not like that because Facebook stopped getting a lot of data from Apple, iPad, and iPhone users.
So
now, I don't think Apple is any more interested in guarding your privacy than Facebook, but
and then why'd they do it? Do you
let's
think?
just say they do a slightly better job.
Or maybe yeah, well, and they market themselves as being better. So,
and it's amazing how insidious some of that stuff can get too, because I was searching Craigslist for used bicycles, just a regular search right off the standard. It's not Google, it's whatever Samsung uses on their or Android uses on their basic thing. It doesn't say, maybe it is Google and they just rebranded it, I don't know. But just doing a Craigslist search, and the very next thing, and Facebook, I'm getting advertisements for bicycles to pop up, which really annoys me because I've spent a very large amount of time specifically selecting book advertisements, and every time it asks you to rate this advertisement for you, it's like I always do that because I want it to show me just book advertisements.
Ideally, as much as I can, I use AdBlock Plus, so I don't see a lot of YouTube ads unless I'm.
You had said Titan had a question in the live chat.
Oh, he asked if Twitter was worse than Facebook, and when it comes to data collection and the algorithms they're using, Twitter is just as bad. But the one thing Facebook allows that Twitter does not is nuance. So you can have a nuanced argument on Facebook about why ivermectin is not really a horse dewormer if you really want to waste your time on that. But you can't on Twitter.
No, and Twitter is, I mean, on a scale of 1 to 10, Twitter is North Korea. I mean, I think Kim Jong-un is more understanding and more forgiving than your average audience on Twitter. It's as toxic as and it's that way by design, right? Because they sat down and calculated the reason that they doubled or close to doubled, I think, the character limit on Twitter was because they realized they needed people to be able to say more, so they wanted them to be able to say more, but not give them the ability to do nuance. So the current character limit is what they have concluded is the most likely to cause fights between users, because rage tweeting is everything. I mean, rage tweeting that's where. And I think I was going to say, well, and we had on Agrippa who did a thing on trolling with us, and I think he is the master of getting people to rage tweet. I mean, he can just get people to, against their own better judgment. And that's the other thing, is you don't have time to, because you can put in so little, and because you're thinking of all the things you want to say that you can't, you don't self-censor as much on Twitter. So you'll say what you need to say takes 5 tweets. On Facebook, you could do it in one post, and by the time you get to the end, presumably you've calmed down. On Twitter, you do your first tweet. Okay, now you've basically committed while you were in a rage. So by the time you get to the 5th, you've probably calmed down some, but you've already committed to the fight. Rage tweeting is a thing. It is deliberate, and that doesn't bring out the best in humanity either.
And Twitter, I think Twitter was the perfect platform for someone like Donald Trump. God. Which is why it's kind of amusing he got banned from there too. Because you can make just broad generalizations, little fact-based, and people just like, oh yeah, you're right. And
what's that? So Maya just said, I mean, you can choose not to argue with fuckers. It's surprisingly easy. Yet you'd think it is for some people. Maya, obviously, amongst them. I was never one of the ones that.
It is for me. I made an actual account just because I didn't want anybody to take Isandering. So I made an account, but it's like I don't follow anyone like maybe Neil deGrasse Tyson or something, NASA, but I never check it. I don't even have the app on my phone, so it's like I don't miss it. I have Facebook because the wife made me a Facebook account, and I talk to her through Messenger and stuff, but. I really don't do much online.
I think there's a class of people.
Facebook.
Yes, please.
Sorry, Facebook is a great way to keep up with family, but maybe it's time to resurrect older ideas where they're not collecting data like just a family, like discussion boards, where you talk to each other, share pictures, and all that stuff.
Well, and then and then she talks about so she had been hired to enforce. Let's see, and then one of the things she said. So she was actually when she first came to Facebook. Her job was actually counter. Let's see, she lead project manager for civic misinformation, and then later for counter espionage at Facebook. And she said in every instance they chose profits over trying to fix any of the problems. Now she had been hired in response to, and I'm trying to find there was a very specific code. Okay, so the severity of the crisis demands that we break from our previous regulatory framework. Facebook wants to trick you into thinking that privacy protections or changes to Section 230 alone will be sufficient. While important, this will not get to the core of the issue, which is that no one truly understands the destructive choices made by Facebook, except for Facebook. We can afford nothing less than full transparency. Now, I've had a couple of opportunities to do this. Usually, it's the Republicans that are slowing down attempts to do this for ideological reasons, ostensibly. But I think one of the other things is we've said before. Well, they have to tell you what information they're giving away. So what they do is what Apple does. I love when Stephen Colbert signed up for a super PAC and created his own super PAC, and it turned out that he only had to sign two pages worth of papers to create a super PAC so that he could start throwing money at legislatures. And so he was talking about it, and then he said, "Oh, good. I thought you had said that this was 26 pages." And I'm like, "What am I signing up for an agreement with iTunes?" I mean, the iTunes agreement is 26 pages. Nobody reads it. Nobody reads it. Of course, nobody reads it.
All right.
And so you end up with this situation where they use information overload to keep anybody from looking at what they're doing. They use a tremendous amount of legalese. They send you more documentation than you could possibly go through. And they say, we gave them all the information, and buried in there somewhere is we have the right to use anything we want to. Most people don't realize this, and I don't think it would stand up in court. But YouTube technically owns everything that we broadcast to YouTube. I may have made it, but they say as soon as you put it on YouTube, we own the rights to it. Again, I don't think that would stand up in court, but I'm not going to be able to go to court against YouTube to fight that if it ever becomes an issue. That's another interesting one, but you have to read the documentation to know that. So I don't know I don't know how you protect against that. But anyways, I think Corpus, you were going to say something.
Well, I want to know what your understanding of Section 230 is, because I think that's one of the most misunderstood things in existence, and Trump trying to demonize it didn't help.
I know very little about Section 230, so I'm not even going to bother opining on it. I need a refresher before I can... Yeah, so please.
Section 230 is one of those internet laws passed by boomers that they managed to get right. And it was basically designed to protect bloggers. And basically, if, let's say, someone doesn't like someone I blog about, and I'm kind of tame, but they go on like a really slanderous, libelous, defamatory rant against that person. And the person that they were the target of reads what this person said. What Section 230 does is that I can't come back and get sued because I'm not responsible for that content.
Yeah, the host of the blog. So if it's WordPress or, yeah. Is that correct?
Yes, it also applies, and I actually agree that it should apply to social media companies too, or otherwise they'd just be facing lawsuits at the time. What you can do is go after the person who posted it. What Donald Trump never understood in all of this is that he's a public figure and he doesn't have basically the same legal... I wish Nate were here. He could tell me. He doesn't have the same legal protections that someone who wasn't a public figure would.
Yeah, public figures, it's much harder to sue for defamation or any of that other stuff. In fact, the burden on them that they have to demonstrate is extraordinarily high, but it's doable. All right, Xandring, any thoughts?
it gets a little difficult because you want to be able to let businesses do. I mean, there's no doubt that Facebook has made people's lives overall better. At least from the individual's point of view.
Mm-hmm.
There could be some societal issues that are being aroused from or arises from collecting so much personal data and selling it. But at the same time, once they've gotten to be that big, there's really not a whole lot that these companies can't do and get away with. And at some point, you're going to need to be able to make sure that they're acting ethically, because you're not going to get, however many millions of people who actually use it to stop using it. And, most people are completely clueless when it comes to, the agreements or what kinds of things they just signed away when they just click the I accept because they want to make an account and everybody else has an account. So,
well, we can put legislative controls in, though, that says they can't do this, this, and this, and we need to stop the Wild West days of these social media companies getting away with whatever they want, and Google is the same way.
Oh, and it's created some problems that we weren't even aware of. Like with some of the algorithms they're using to feed you more of what you're already biased towards. So when you search for something, it's going to, it records what your biases are, and so it's going to try and feed you what it thinks you want to see, so that you'll use them more often. And that's not necessarily a societal good.
It isn't.
Well, okay, so let's say
because then it also. Sorry,
please,
go ahead.
Please, Porpoise, because please.
It also it's also going to push you further to whatever extreme you're already on, because it's going to feed you more and more content that is towards that end. So eventually you have these people going off into their own echo chambers. There are two steps. First, it creates a filter bubble where you're only getting information that you already agree with. Then it causes you to go into echo chambers where people are telling you what you already agree with.
Yeah,
so
it creates a feedback loop.
And we essentially have two feedback loops going in different directions.
So does anyone have an example of how that works? So if I am, I think I'm going to start to do some honest research. Let's assume for a second that I think vaccines don't work. How does that work? And I say, I'm going to do due diligence and I'm going to Google this and see if they really work or not. How does this work in practically with that example?
All right, well, let's do a quick search right now in Google, and Google actually has started to crack down on some of this, but vaccines don't work COVID. Let's see what it comes up with. Hopefully the first thing will be like some sort of warning about misinformation. All right, so actually, this is actually decent on the first page, because we've got results from Nature, results from CNBC, results from Bloomberg. I mean, these aren't except for the Nature, they aren't scientific articles, but
well, at least they're reputable sources.
What did you actually Google? What were the words that you did?
Vaccines don't work COVID, so it's probably. So let's take COVID out and see what happens, because it's basically an if-then search that's triggered by COVID most likely. So let's see if they have one for vaccines. But there are so many conspiracy theories that even if this happens, you have to keep up with them. And I don't know, what's a good conspiracy theory right now?
Good conspiracy. I had one and I can't.
I was just looking at I was wondering because the algorithm will customize, a lot of the search results based off of, your history, the information that they have on you. Where do you go to get news? What news articles do you click on? What do you search for, and which of those things do you click on? It keeps track of all that stuff. So everybody's results are going to be slightly different. And since I do spend a lot of time researching things like, Second Amendment rights and things like that. So I was wondering if I was going to get a different
result. good point. Let me sign out where it shouldn't be tracking, although I think it'll still have my cookies and my search history, so maybe I should clear that.
Well, so
let's try that.
Now, so this is definitely improvement, but one of the things that has a tendency to happen, if I understand this correctly, is that the there are fewer websites for up until recently. Recently, this has changed once fake news became an issue in this regard, so it's changed, especially in the 6 months. But let's go back 6 months. There were far more websites talking about why vaccines didn't work than why vaccines did work. And the reason was because nobody thought you really had to make a website to contest this fake news. Nobody thought you had to make a website to contest all the false information. So people weren't actively talking about why they work. So if you started to Google, do vaccines work, what you would get is usually you would get inundated with more of the conspiracy sites that say no, they don't, because those were the ones that were actively putting themselves forward. Now, if you said something more like, what is the evidence that vaccines work, you'd be more likely to get something that would be accurate as a result, because now they're starting to talk about how and why vaccines actually work, as opposed to the search that you actually put in. So you have to be very careful how you frame them and what precisely you're looking for. And again, they're going to try to get results back that A, encourage you to do more searches, and B, are more along the lines of not what you need, because ostensibly you need accurate information, but what you're looking for, which is confirmation bias. You're looking for information that supports what you already believe, and the engine's actually pretty good at figuring that out. And keep in mind, this is like, I mean...
On my search...
Please.
On my search here, I've got kind of a mixed bag. Like, the very first thing is, unvaccinated Americans falsely say the need for booster shots proves COVID vaccines don't work. Kaiser survey shows. Then some vaccines last a lifetime. Here's why COVID-19 shots don't. The vaccinated are worried, and scientists don't have answers. And then one that just says vaccines work from the CDC. Pretty short and sweet. 5 reasons why COVID. That doesn't make. I think it's supposed to say 5 reasons why COVID shouldn't be your first choice. COVID vaccines shouldn't be your first choice. So I've got it's almost like every other one is like more of a right-wing this vaccine doesn't work, and then more of the scientific, no, they do work, and here's how and why and exactly what's going on with them. So I've got a mixed bag here.
So basically I'm guessing what we're seeing here is that it's taken into what Google has figured out some of our biases are, and I have to wonder how you'd research this. I mean, this is one reason why I absolutely support forcing these companies to open source their selection algorithms.
So we know what they're selecting for.
Well, most people won't, but people can figure it out. People who know how the code is supposed to work can run it through their own tests.
Well, I mean, I was kind of curious what was going to pop up. I mean, there's been a lot more, especially around the COVID vaccine. There's been a lot more push to try and get rid of misinformation and put out correct information. But I also go to very far right, like OAN Network. I try and find some pretty far right news sources, and I also try and find some very far left, because I want to know what each side is screaming at the other about, and what their arguments are and what their rebuttals are. So I specifically look for very biased news sources to look at both sides.
Don't assume that the far left doesn't have its own, let's just say, wackadoodles. They do.
Yes, they absolutely do.
He's not going to make that mistake, I'm sure. Okay, what I want to do is because this is essentially what we're talking about, but I want to put this in a bit more of a practical, because this was terrifying. What I'm reading now is from the Business Insider, a great source. I use these guys all the time. BusinessInsider.com. The incredible story, and we've talked about this on occasion. This actually brings me back to when we had Dr. Shook on, and he said post-truth world, and we're just going to have to start monitoring what we call truth. And I find that I don't like that, but on the flip side, I don't see much of an alternative. At any rate, the incredible story of how Target exposed a teen girl's pregnancy. Quote, Target broke through a new level of customer tracking with the help of a statistical genius, Andrew Pohl, according to the New York Times Magazine. Cover story by Charles Duhigg. Now, what Pohl did was he identified 25 products that, when put together, would likely indicate that a woman was pregnant. Now, I used a whole bunch of other models, but the pregnancy was the one in particular where they decided where this one in particular worked, and just out of the holy smoke. A man in Minneapolis went into Target and said he demanded to see a manager. And he wanted to see the manager because his daughter had gotten all of these coupons for baby clothes, cribs, milking products, all these other things. And he said, quote, my daughter got this in the mail. She's still in high school, and you're sending her coupons for baby clothes and cribs. Are you trying to encourage her to get pregnant? So he flipped out. He's pissed because she's getting all these coupons. Now, the manager didn't know, but he goes through the mailer and finds out that she had been targeted advertisements for maternity clothing, nursery furniture, pictures of smiling infants, and the whole 9 yards. He apologized and then called the man again a few days later to apologize. However, when he called the man back, the father was somewhat abashed. Quote, I had a talk with my daughter. It turns out there have been some activities in my house I had not been completely aware of. She's due in August. I owe you an apology. So the algorithm correctly identified that she was pregnant before her own father did. This was an article posted February 16th, 2012. So, yeah.
I remember that story, and it was not from 2012. Somebody recently brought that story up and showed some of the interviews with it about that. And I wish I could remember what I was watching where I saw that. But yeah, just not too awfully long ago, like within the last month, I saw that story pop up again.
This is why we have to start finding ways to limit what data companies are allowed to collect.
Well, what they're allowed to do with it. I mean, I'm sure it seemed completely innocuous in the time, but of course this is how it happened. And whether or not you agree with father should or shouldn't know, this isn't the way you should have found out. And it's terrifying that that Target knew what was going on in this man's family before he did. I mean, that's just doing statistics.
Yeah. Actually, this might be a good time to bring it up, even though it's not directly connected. Have either of you read the Foundation series by Isaac Asimov?
No, I know what it is, but I haven't read it.
Well, if you know the basic conceit of it, it's basically a mathematical model that predicts how large groups of people will act. And it's actually a series on Apple TV right now.
And predicts the end of the...
It's just
there are people who predicted the end of the civilization, and they're sort of ahead of the curve on... Is that roughly it? Remember?
Yeah,
correctly?
and they're trying to find a way to shorten the time between the interregnum between when the empire falls and a new empire would form, because they can't... The empire isn't necessarily a good thing, but they can't think of anything better.
All right. So you brought up Foundation.
So kind of like open markets.
Yeah. Yeah. Well,
that's kind of like open markets.
Yeah, something like that.
Well, everybody expects me to be an anti-capitalist.
Not necessarily great, but we can't think of anything better.
It works.
All Target is doing is just... Sorry.
Oh, please.
All Target is doing, and all these companies are doing, is collecting statistics so they can try to sell you products that you might be interested in. Sometimes it's irritating because they guess incorrectly. In this case, it brings up a lot of issues with privacy. And for some families, this brings up questions of the daughter's safety. And in this case, we'll just call it a fetus in this case, the fetus's safety. Because this isn't always welcome information.
Well, and who knows why she was keeping... Yeah, that's a very good point. Who knows why she was keeping it from her father? I mean, there may be... It may be because he has a tendency to not to lose his temper when he thinks certain things are going on, and who the hell knows? There's any number of you have no idea the dynamics of that family. What were we gonna say, Andrew?
Yeah, yeah. You may. I mean, you bring up a good point. Is you don't know why she wasn't. I mean, you can kind of guess. A high schooler turns up pregnant, and now they have to try and tell their parents. But and there could be nothing fishy going on. It could just be a very difficult thing. I was like, to be honest though, had she asked her dad about the same thing she was asking Google or whatever, whatever searches she was making, had she done the same thing with her father, father probably would have known just as well as Target did.
That's an interesting point. Brings up something that actually Porpoise had said in the pre-show when they had algorithms that were trying to hire employees and trying to do it without bias. Did you want to bring that up, Porpoise?
Oh, yeah, I wish I could find the actual story, but a company decided to remove bias from its hiring processes. So they have basically programmers write an AI algorithm to try to remove bias from its hiring practices. They do a review a few months later, and the company is hiring like 60% men, 40% women, and they find that statistically matches what the company did. I may have the numbers wrong, but it doesn't really matter. The point is that the programmers had used the company's data, which the computer had just selected new hires based on the company's biases.
So because it was people programming, they programmed their own biases and what they were looking for and then the algorithm just did what they would have done.
Yeah, it was probably unintentional, but
usually biases are. Yes, please.
Also, I'd recommend reading The Foundation if anyone hasn't.
I'd love to. You know what? Maybe if I get it on audio or something, I'll be able to get to it. It's just, I haven't.
Watch the Apple TV series.
Yeah,
I have the audiobooks. I also have all of the books in paperback. I read it back when I was like 6th grade or whatever it was. The series has been out for quite a long time. I wish I could remember. I was quite a bit younger. I can't remember the exact details of the series. I mean, the general overview of kind of like how I remembered The Lord of the Rings because I read it so young. But
it's also an Apple TV series.
Yeah,
I want to watch that before I read this or listen to the series again because I tend to. That way, I can enjoy both.
Oh yeah, because if you just read it, and it's fresh in your mind. Yeah, that's a good point. I've seen a couple.
Yeah, that's why I've got all of the A Song of Ice and Fire. I've got the whole Game of Thrones series on audio too, and I started listening to it and then stopped. I was like, no, I want to watch the Game of Thrones, so that way I would enjoy both. Although apparently I guess it does kind of pretty closely follow the books until the books ran out.
So,
but that's kind of beside the point.
All right, so
I'm just curious.
Please.
What would you do what would you do, Sandrine, if you were the CEO of Facebook, other than $500 million or more?
God, that's a really difficult thing to say. Because one, I don't know exactly what all is involved in running it. So how busy am I actually going to be? Let me
rephrase the question. How would you fix the problems if you had enough power to fix the problems?
Well, one, I'd want Facebook to be completely transparent about what it does, why it's doing it, and how it's doing it. That way, it's anybody who cares can find all of that information. And then, if you still want to use the service, even being as completely transparent as you can be, well, this is what we're going to do with your data that we collect. And if you still want to use the platform, then, well, fine, you can use it, and we'll use your data. I would. I'm not entirely sure that I would want, like, from a governmental point of view, want to stifle what they're doing so much, or tell them that they can't use people's data, but that they have to be transparent about how they're collecting it, what they're collecting, et cetera, like I said before. Because I think Facebook has brought quite a few good things to people, keeping people in touch, being able to, especially, families. So I wouldn't want to stifle that end of it, but I also want them to be completely transparent about what's going on.
I would say there is absolutely data. Facebook and sorry, go ahead, Nick.
I was going to ask you, how would you answer the same question?
I would well, first of all, I think first of all, you're going to have to force Facebook, Google, Twitter, and a couple other companies to be transparent. They're not going to do it on their own because too much of their money depends on these algorithms being secret. Because these are trade secrets right now, and they should be. Ideally, we should treat Twitter, Facebook, and even Google the way we treated television stations and radio stations when they first came out. Right now, because they were heavily regulated, and it stopped a lot of problems that could have happened. Right now, the internet was a new thing, and I was going to say a lot of people, even in Congress now, don't understand it because they don't understand technology. And they just said, oh yeah, these tech guys know what they're doing. And they're sending us money, so we're just going to let them do what they want, essentially. Even though some people are like, oh yeah, big tech's not your friend, and yeah, big tech isn't your friend, but it's not conspiring against you to make the world more liberal. It's just conspiring against you to get more money as it possibly can from you because it's a corporation. And yeah, be open about what's collected, stop them from collecting certain data, open source the weak AI algorithms, make sure certain behaviors that Google does are turned off by default. And honestly, I think for some things, especially for YouTube, I would require them to have some human review for some of their processes, because while the weak AI algorithm can do a lot of things, it cannot pick up on context.
Oh, Jesus, yeah.
Yeah.
Everybody who publishes on YouTube knows that problem. All right, well, so I think we're going to wrap this up. I do want to see if anyone has anything else they want to say. I have two final comments, but I'll give one and then I'll wait on the other one. But first of all, in 1906, Upton Sinclair published a novel called The Jungle, which was sort of a fictionalized account, but nonetheless, it was actually much closer to journalism than a novel. But the book was a sneak peek at to what was going on in meat packing in the United States, including people falling into the grinders and the meat just going out, to families and so on and so forth. And as a result of this book, which exposed the horrors of meatpacking, which was still not great, but oh boy, was it a problem back then. This resulted in the Meat Inspection Act of 1906, which revolutionized safety and making sure both that the workers were at least reasonably safe and that the food was far safer as it was going out to the public. So it seems to me that, if we were able to do it with the meat packing industry, we can do it here. It's actually, in many ways, a very similar kind of problem because it's an industry that's making a tremendous amount of money by not having any kind of oversight and by not following any kind of rules. And well, gee, if you follow the rules, it's going to cut into profits and going to cut into what we can deliver. But I don't see any problems with the meat industry in this country today. I think they've managed to do just fine, and the safety and health for all Americans has been risen quite significantly as a result of the Meat Inspection Act. So I have to believe that there's a solution. Anyways, let me say then before we go any further, we have a Discord. It's Titan just posted it. So if you want to discuss this or anything else, we'll be in the Discord after the show. So I hope you will come and join us. Also, please like and subscribe. It helps us with the algorithm, and that's actually really important to us. That's sort of our god is the YouTube algorithm. So if you could please like and subscribe if you've liked the show, pass this on to other people who are interested. We'd really appreciate it. It's one of the best ways you can help us out. So having said that, Ms. Andring, is there anything else that you had that you wanted to add before we wrap this up?
One thing I would point out is, Maya also pointed out, is that these companies are a little bit more transparent than most people give them credit for, because the average individual doesn't even bother to read any of the, user agreements. They don't even know what they're agreeing to. So, there needs to be some accountability for individual users to make sure they know what they're agreeing to when they sign up to use these things. I'm sorry, I had to be very unprofessional. I had to walk into the truck stop, so.
Oh, no worries. So, all right. Porpoise, any final thoughts? I believe you're muted.
Well, I think a lot of them rely on people just not reading these user agreements, so we're going to have to just tell them they can't do certain things, because otherwise they'll put stupid things in the agreements and they'll just say, oh, it's in the agreement, you agreed to it. Relying on ignorance is not a good strategy. Also, if anyone is interested in learning how to program in Scratch right now, I do Scratch tutorials Saturday nights. So be excellent to each other, and so long, and thanks for all the fish.
And I just realized your link to your show is not in the description. We will put that in as soon as we close out. I will make that my first priority as soon as the show ends, to make sure that the link to your channel is in the description. So thank you for that. Again, Francis Haugen, I'm going to hope I'm pronouncing that correctly. Quote, Facebook wants you to believe that the problems we're talking about are unsolvable. They want you to believe in false choices. They want you to believe that you must choose between a Facebook full of divisive and extreme content or losing one of the most important values in our country, that our country was founded upon, free speech. That you must choose between public oversight of Facebook's choices and your personal privacy. That to be able to share fun photos of your kids with old friends, you must also be inundated with anger-driven virality. Ooh, not quite sure what that word is. They want you to believe that this is just part of the virility. I think virality. That my understanding of that word is different than the context it appears to be used in, but that's the English language. They want you to believe that this is just part of the deal. I'm here today to tell you that that is not true. These problems are solvable. A safer, free speech respecting, more enjoyable social media is possible. But there is one thing that I hope everyone takes away from these disclosures. It's that if Facebook can change, it clearly will not do so on its own. Thank you all for joining us. Tomorrow we will have Overtime with Joe's Serious Mind, and we will have our Friday Hangout, as we do every Friday, 10 p.m. Hope you guys will join us. Thank you, 𝐓𝐢𝐬𝐿𝐴 and Sinister Porpoise. Thank you to the mods. We will see you all tomorrow.